Hi everyone, it's Mr. B, and in this podcast we're going to take a look at domains and kingdoms. If you remember in our last unit of study, we talked about how scientists use different levels of classification, and domains and kingdoms are at the very top or the broadest group of classification. So we're going to take a look at those domains and kingdoms briefly. There are three domain systems that you need to make sure that you're familiar with. There is a group that's called bacteria, there's a group that's called Archaea, and there's a group that's called Eukarya. And so we're going to look at each one of those individually, but you do need to know that there are three domain systems: bacteria, Archaea, and Eukarya. The way that organisms get placed into the appropriate domain or kingdom is based on their cell type, it's based on their ability to make food, and it's based on the number of cells that they have. And when they talk about cell type, they could be referring to whether or not it has a cell wall, or if it does not have a cell wall. It could be their ability to make food, meaning that they're able to photosynthesize, or whether they need to go and capture their own food. And it could be number of cells, whether they're unicellular or multicellular. Obviously, the more cells that something has, the more complex that it is. So we're going to look at how organisms fit into the domains based on these three ideas. The first domain that we're going to talk about is bacteria. Bacteria is a very, very large group, and also a very difficult group to study when scientists first started looking at them. They realized that there were lots and lots of them. But because of the fact that when scientists first started to classify things back to the Linnaeus days, we discovered that a lot of times they didn't have the equipment, the microscopes, and the ways to discover microscopic objects. And so over time, they discovered that there are lots and lots of bacteria and archaea. And so this group wasn't studied and is really starting to be studied a lot more over the last decade. Bacteria examples are E. coli, which is a bacteria that can get into your body and cause you to have a lot of discomfort. Prokaryotes are cell-lacking nucleuses. So basically, a bacteria doesn't have a nucleus like an animal cell. They can be autotrophs, which mean they make their own food, or they can also be heterotrophs, which means they have to go and get their own food. So bacteria are very versatile, whether they're autotrophs or heterotrophs. And there are some good bacteria and there are some harmful ones. Some good bacteria are ones that we use in cooking to help to, an example is yogurt, to culturize it. E. coli, however, is a very harmful one that doesn't help the body at all. In fact, it's very harmful to us and can be very problematic for us. So bacteria, very large group. Prokaryotes, autotrophs and heterotrophs, can be unicellular, and unicellular meaning only single-celled, and there are some good and some bad in them. The next group is Archaea, and Archaea was thought to have come before the bacteria. A lot of that is because of the fact that they're found in these extreme places, and so some people tend to think that they have been around all the way since the beginning of Earth because of the fact that they are able to survive in such harsh conditions. For example, they're found in places like hot springs, salty waters, swamps. These guys are unicellular, which means that they're single-celled. There are autotrophs and heterotrophs, so again you see that there's a mix of either being able to produce their own food or having to get their own food. Prokaryotes, which means that they're able to lack the nucleus that we had mentioned. And they're different from bacteria because of their chemical makeup and structure. So Archaea, thought to have come before the bacteria, can live in harsh places such as hot springs, salty water, and swamps, unicellular, both autotrophs and heterotrophs. They're prokaryotes, and they're different than bacteria. They look almost identical if you were to look at them underneath the microscope, but the structure and the chemical makeup is what separates the two of them. The next group that you're probably more familiar with is the group called Eukarya. And in this group we have protists and funguses and plants and animals. Protists are a group that are eukaryotes. They have a hard time being classified into just plants or animals. That's how they got their unique name, because they couldn't exactly be a plant. They didn't have the qualifications to strictly be plants, and they didn't have the qualifications to be animals as well. So these guys get put into their own group. They're called protists. Some of them are autotrophs, some of them are heterotrophs. So again, some can make their own food and some cannot. They are unicellular and also multicellular. So we see the first transition from being single-celled, and some of them are multicellular. So if you start to think about how this looks, if we talk about Archaea, so if we take and go with Archaea, that would be a group that was very around at the very, very beginning, and then you had a group that were protists, and then you had bacteria, and then you had protists, and so these guys are kind of the transition point between becoming more complex. The funguses, and the example is a mushroom or mold or mildew, these guys are eukaryotes, which mean they have a nucleus. So we're introduced both in the protists and in the funguses to the idea of having a nucleus, which is a very complex idea because it's able to do a lot of things for itself with having a nucleus. It's able to power itself, it's able to repair itself. So these are very, very, very complex organisms starting to develop. Also, we see that they're multicellular, so no longer are they just unicellular, they now have many cells. And these guys are heterotrophs. So the funguses are heterotrophs, which means that they're able to, they have to get their own food. And the way that a fungus gets its own food is that when there's dead or decaying organisms, those nutrients get put into the ground, and the funguses actually absorb the nutrients, and that's how they get their source of energy. So protists and funguses, examples of eukarya. The two that you're probably most familiar with are plants and animals. Plants are multicellular, so that means they have many cells. They have the idea that there's a cell wall, so there is an extra protection layer that we refer to as being a cell wall, and animals do not have that. Plants are the only group that we see that have a cell wall. Again, they're eukaryotes, which means that the cells have a nucleus. These guys are autotrophs. That means they're able to make their own food, which they do through photosynthesis. There are a couple of heterotroph examples that can do both autotroph photosynthesizing, or they're able to capture their own food, such as the Venus flytrap. Animals, on the other hand, are multicellular, which is meaning that they have many cells. Eukaryotes mean that they have a nucleus. Heterotrophs, so they have to, and we do too, have to be able to go and get our own food. And diverse because of the fact that they're able to locate food, capture food, digest the food, and to also be able to eat it and digest it. So that's a very quick look at the different domains and kingdoms, and that's it for now. Thank you.